I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is on vacation, and Andrew Kuo, despite this new terrifying world we live in, still takes no days off.
Sixers 2020 champs. Let's go.
They did win the final game of the season to this point. This is a Cookies emergency pod. I believe it marks the only time we've done back-to-back podcasts ever. But it does warrant it for a slight bit of breaking news.
What happened?
The NBA season has been suspended, on a hiatus, potentially canceled. No one really knows. As of last night, the NBA is no longer playing any games.
It's kind of like the Madison Square Garden way of looking at the world. No one knows. It's uncharted waters, man.
We are all relegated.
Scary. Are you scared?
No.
Yeah.
I'm not scared in a sense of holy shit. I'm glad that we are taking precautions now. Because as we know, we talked yesterday a bit about what the NBA was going to do. Were they going to play games without fans? We had some great suggestions on
some not great suggestions.
Floating courts in outer space, on beaches. Great ideas.
VR.
But as it turns out, in last night's game with the Utah Jazz and the Oklahoma City Thunder, it was between them, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It became clear that Rudy Gobert, the journeyman center for the Utah Jazz, had tested positive for coronavirus. And the game was shut down. People were ushered out of the arena. And the season was quickly suspended. It all happened very, very quickly. But am I scared? Because wow, this is getting bad. No, we already knew this was happening, right?
Right.
We knew people were going to get it. We knew things would have to get canceled. So it did not elevate my fear in that respect.
I guess what a better word is dread. You know, we all saw the possibility of this happening. It happened fast, but when things actually happen, when the person you're seeing actually breaks up with you, it's not fear. It's just this feeling of actuality that is kind of surreal. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not scared either. I think this is something that we can handle as a country, and culturally it's really strange to see the NBA float away at the end of the Avengers movie, into dust for now. And like the Avengers movie, they might come back, reform particles of dust into actual games again. But the stock market has me paying attention, the way people are acting. I'm just curious. I'm touching base with all my friends, just seeing if their brains are okay and seeing if my brain is okay, all that good stuff.
Your brain is fine. I'll have you know. When I'm thinking about the season being canceled and you're seeing the instant responses that people are like, oh my God, I can't believe this. This is insane. And of course, we look at it to your earlier word with that it's surreal. Holy shit, I can't believe this is occurring. But with a little bit of perspective, what has really upended our world as Americans over the last 20 years? Let's say even New Yorkers. We had 9/11. We had the blackout. We had Hurricane Sandy.
The Crown Heights riot.
But that was even 95?
Yeah.
We can, and that only affected one area.
Right.
In general, people have only had a handful of incidents that they could point at and say, things definitely changed during that period of time. And when you compare that to not only other Americans in other places who have, suffered more devastating effects from natural disasters. So.
Oh man, yeah, for sure.
But if you look around the world, we've been blissfully untouched by the realities of the world, like famine, plague, disease, war, in the way that someone who, say, grew up in Bangladesh has not. Okay. There are countless billions of people who have had their lives utterly turned upside down by acts of God in ways that are unimaginable to us. So I think we can look at the NBA season being canceled with a little bit of perspective and say, yeah, that is a change for us, but it's also not insane in the grand scheme of things.
And this is a tough metric. The NBA, definitely. The NBA is a man-made idea. It's a company that entertains us, but it's also like kind of a fabric of what we live through. And I think it's okay to over or down. Like every time something like this happens, I think it's okay for someone to freak out because I don't know what they're thinking. And to be, the cliche of like there's starving kids in Africa, like we have been untouched, but maybe not. Maybe an NBA fan is saying, I lived through AIDS in the 80s. I lived through 9/11. I lost someone in 9/11. I lived through the blackout, the market crash in 2008. And now this coronavirus, I'm like, that's legit, man. Emote all you want, A lot of people were clapping back as they do on social media about what we can and can't talk about. Talk about everything. This is weird. It's sort of like the Kobe Bryant day or week or month. If you want to talk about how this makes you think about Magic Johnson, talk about it. Like, I think policing this kind of discussion is not for me. I think
I'm not trying to police it. I'm trying to offer people a little bit of perspective to say, this is true. This is affecting our lives, and it's going to over the next couple months. Things are going to be different. We're going to have social distancing. Your lifestyle will change. People are going to get sick. Yeah. Like this is going to happen. Our country has not done a good job preparing for it. A lot of it is falling on the private sector to encourage people to stop gathering. Yeah. And our government has completely dropped the ball in a way that is going to cost a lot of people their life because our government is run by stooges.
For sure. And I think this is the time, this is like the zombie apocalypse movie scenario where I think we all have to be the main character and just be like, as everything as it comes, just be level-headed, be calm, and it might be the worst for you even. You might get your arm bitten off by a zombie. But
don't sneak off to have sex in the woods as much as you want to do it.
Don't make a deal with the aliens behind everyone's back thinking it's going to help everybody. It's not. But
this is not your chance to steal some gold.
Yeah. I mean, one of my buddies loves the raft scenario. If the world ended, who among our peers would be on the raft? And I'm like, me, certainly not. I'm the guy in Lord of the Flies who breaks his glasses first and gets beat up and left in a ditch, but whimpering about the Knicks. But I think there's certain people in our lives that can handle being calm, Gen X tranquility, and deal with problems, and it's not our White House, perhaps.
I'll be right back. I'm going to steal some dinosaur egg embryos.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be fine. Everything's going to work out for me.
I'm going to save this alien because I think it could be used as a weapon for our military later. And we'll all live through this. I'll just hide it in the corridor.
I'll smuggle this back to our world.
Yeah. Oh, this alien egg. Cool.
But yeah. Let's just put the NBA in that perspective of we've had seasons delayed, partially canceled because of labor negotiations before.
99, the Spurs, the Knicks.
It's happened multiple times.
Yeah.
So the cancellation of the NBA is not the earth stopping rotation.
But it's important to us. And
sure, this is a basketball podcast, so I've been told.
Allegedly.
So, but let's talk a little bit about the villain, Rudy Gobert.
Oh, that despicable Frenchman.
A long-limbed 7'1", 7'2", 7'3", large Frenchman.
You guys are good at restaurants, but bad at fending off viruses.
So a few days ago, after there was the announcement that the media had to stay a specific distance away from players. There's a video of him doing this. You can find it if you want. It's going to be replayed many times. Of Rudy Gobert, after his interview, touching all the microphones, massaging them on his way out, intentionally so, to make some point about his lack of fear of coronavirus.
Or our fear of coronavirus.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
Same thing.
True.
And then yesterday it was announced that he was sick. And everyone sort of was like, huh. And then it was announced last night that he indeed was the player who had coronavirus, and he has now passed it on to Donovan Mitchell, one of his teammates, and probably many more. He's also been playing. So now I believe 4 other teams, including the relegated New York Knicks, are now in quarantine for the next 2 weeks. So Gobert is the NBA vector at this point. And everyone's like, dude, you are fucking dumb. Why were you so dumb? I have a little bit of sympathy for this dumb Frenchman. You know, like, he screwed up. He's a moron. It happens.
Yeah, and we saw with Trump's address to the nation last night. We could see with his arc and the way he treats this. It always starts with hubris. It's always like, oh, Chinese people, Iranians, whatever, we're Americans. This doesn't happen on our watch. And then it's just like, oh, it goes from hubris to anger to like despair. And I think we're at the anger point. We're not quite at despair, in my opinion. But I think like being overly confident is something that's a natural feeling. And we're watching that kind of shatter a little bit, but I don't blame Rudy either. I don't blame any of these superheroes because they are like physically elite human beings on Earth.
I do blame Gobert for being dumb, but I also have sympathy for him. At the same time, he's also a bit of a scapegoat here because the season was going to get canceled.
Yeah.
And apparently before they came up with sort of a scattershot plan that games would be continued without fans in attendance, some teams had already been leaning towards putting the season on hiatus anyway. And that was why it happened so quickly.
And
wasn't as if they're like, he's sick, what do we do? Teams were already arguing for this.
And teams had been petitioning to postpone games. And on the internet before Gobert was a talking point, people were going at James Dolan because he was the only franchise owner who wanted to play the games. But not shockingly, I'm with James Dolan on this because we have to continue as I think the game should have been postponed, but his rationale I like. If it is, we have to continue our way of life. We all have to wash our hands and be careful, but life must go on because this is a flu or something worse than a flu. But I agree with Washington State and
James Dolan is a monumental moron.
Yes.
And him saying we should keep going on as normal, despite the fact that
said that. He did not say that.
Well, we saw, according to Woj, the Knicks were saying that until the government says don't meet in large groups of people, we should continue doing it. And he was the only one who said it. That was dumb. It was dumb.
But you know what I mean when I say, like, I think what we were talking about cookies yesterday and what I think we should still hammer home is just like, you can still go out to a restaurant. You can still go out and buy as much toilet paper you need for your intense bowel movements for the next week. It's just like massive toilet paper consumption. You can still do those things. Wash your hands. Maybe let's not congregate. We'll be okay.
I agree with all of that. I'm just saying, we know at this point you have to stop meeting in large groups of people.
Yeah, let's do that.
You have to stop doing it. And him being like, let's just keep meeting in large groups of people. And no, dude, no.
Well, this is the man.
That's not life going on as normal. We can continue doing the things you said. Yeah. Taking massive poops.
Huge dumps.
Just incredible, just poundage.
Cutting so much rope.
As you said, meeting up with your friends in small groups, but staying somewhat apart. There are things you can do to preserve normalcy and not go full hermit. Mm-hmm. But large groups of people all meeting in the same place, consuming foods and beverages, nah, man, nah.
But remember, this is a man who wants to be the 8th seed in the playoffs every year just for that one series revenue. He doesn't mind getting swept. He just wants that revenue for those games.
And that's what and this is what I was saying about Gobert letting people off the hook a little bit. Because if you're the NBA, if you're already refunding tickets, that's a lot of money. You're giving everyone back the rest of their tickets. You're not selling any more tickets. You're not selling overpriced beers or popcorn or any other concessions. None of that stuff. You're not getting parking. You're also going to lose all the money from events that are canceled in those arenas because a lot of the teams also own them. It is a massive money suck coming from these owners. The last thing they feel like doing is still having the games.
That's true.
Because if they play the games, then they're definitely losing all that stuff. If they suspend the games and then they play them later, they don't have to pay you back.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's the math here. If the season gets pushed for a month and a half and we restart it in May, then they can get that money for those games.
I mean, we were talking about this immediately. I think a lot of this is legal, and legal is always attached to money. And I believe Silver does care about his fans, but also I'm sure his lawyers immediately called him, well, you have to cancel these games. We cannot be subject to these lawsuits. It could take down the entire league, and it's fine. It's sad to think of the NBA as a business, but we always talk about salary cap and contracts and how these guys are under and overpaid. And now we're seeing the owners kind of come in and be like, oh, they make half the money. And they desperately are trying to protect that. And this morning, Mark Cuban came out and said he expects this season to continue. He hopes it will, and it could go until August. So there's contingency here.
When you were asking me if I was scared or feel dread, not necessarily. It's really just that we don't know how long this is going to take to get sorted out. That to me is that's the real question and the thing that's bothersome. Because our nation has been so shabby at preparation, so lax in getting people tested, covering up information, stymieing research, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This could be the next 6 months, or this could be the next month. It could get incredibly bad. It could not get bad. We just don't know. That to me is that's the sticking point. And I don't know if it's dread as much as do we know when we're going to get back on with our lives and do things normally and not have to worry? I
mean, for however much certain people want to frame China as inept and calling this a China virus, which it is, and that's a whole other conversation about race that we can absolutely have. But a lot of people are saying, is the U.S. going to be the Chinese version of this, which contained it and now is kind of resuming life, or the Italian version of this that didn't do a good job right away and now is in a critical state as a country? And those are the two polar extremes with this example. And we don't know where America lies with this because it's a much bigger country. And but China is the biggest of places, and they clamped down on this pretty hard. And after a few stumbling weeks, contained it as far as we know.
One issue is that because we can't trust our federal government to do anything right, and that they are using this in, of course, malicious and stupid ways, like the immediate interest is bailing out the cruise ship industry and closing our borders to non-white people. It's okay, here's this disaster. How can we use it for awful ends, which have nothing to do with keeping anyone safe at all? Yeah. A lot of it, I think, will come down to states, to cities.
But that's what he wants. Trump's whole agenda is the states should take control of their policy and private sector will take control.
Right, because he can't do anything and his brain is porridge.
And he's a capitalist. So, this is the Republican agenda.
Right, do nothing for no one.
I mean, you burn hot with this, and I get it. I'm into it. But
what are we talking about here? We're talking about the...
If we take someone we think is repugnant out of the equation, this is something that a lot of Republicans would do.
Of course it is. But we know their moral code.
I am not a Republican. But,
I know you're not. But their moral code is never to help people. It's always states, private sector across the board. Like, you nailed it.
Yeah.
That it is saying we take no responsibility for anyone else. Other people rely on it. It's volunteers. It's charity. It's private sector. It's states. It's not us.
Yeah, I mean, they do things, but they believe a lot of it falls on the hands of our citizens and our citizens' right to create industry. And, they're really opposed to the government getting in the way of something like, which we both are on the same page on, healthcare. Like, I believe the government should help everybody as much as they can with healthcare, and they believe it should be privatized.
But they want to bail out the cruise ship industry. They want to bail out the airline industry.
That's just optic for like one.
They're going to give billions of dollars to like fracking companies. They're going to use incredible corporate welfare for their business buddies.
Well, I wish I was rich, because this is how you get richer. The market is in a full place where you can take advantage of it right now, and it's kind of sickening how this happens, because I think although a lot of wealthy people are losing a lot of money, I think a lot of them are thinking that's going to come back and maybe even multiply, because there's an opportunity every time there's a crash like this. And I'm not a market expert, but I've been trying to do my due diligence. It weeds out kind of teetering companies and stocks, and it kind of identifies the strength of other stocks, and that's when smart people pounce on those.
It goes to that adage, when there's blood on the ground, buy property.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
But, back to the NBA's cancellation. What, at this point, are the options?
Well, we can...
What's been discussed, sorry to cut you off there.
Sorry.
What's been discussed is starting the season later, skipping the games, going straight to the playoffs. What is the best option here?
You make Ben Simmons MVP. You make Allen Iverson the logo, which he already was.
Yep.
Sixers are champions, and Brett Brown is coach of the year. So what's the problem? Can we give Mitchell Robinson something?
Yeah.
I love Mitch. Can we just give him
Defensive Player of the Year?
Oh, cool. Done.
Rudy Gobert deserves to be stripped of all of his prior Defensive Player of the Year awards.
He might be Offensive Player of the Year.
The Woj bomb about Donovan Mitchell was that Gobert has been careless with his hands on other people's things. Like, he's been like the absolute worst. Here's Corona V. And then everyone's like, dude, you gave me Corona? Like, that was that the joke? Like, master ironist, Rudy Gobert?
He's the guy who dies in the survival movie first.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The guy who chuckles at like the risk and then dies, perishes immediately.
Right. Yeah. He's the biggest, most imposing guy. And you're like, we're safe with this guy because he could wrestle a bear into the ground, except of the hubris. He's a little touchy.
God damn.
I was trying to think of like a touching net pun.
Freaking
Touch foul.
goober.
Yeah. He'll be fine too. I think a lot of NBA players will have this, and he is patient zero. But I don't think we're gonna think of Tom Hanks as the carrier for coronavirus.
I don't want to speculate about who will be okay and who won't. I think the NBA is a fortunate demographic. They're young. They're in great shape. They're wealthy. They will hopefully be 100% okay. Mm-hmm. And to your point, we've heard numbers from, Angela Merkel saying 70% of Germany will get this. Some experts have said that half the people in the U.S. will get it. Or perhaps it's like 2%. You just don't know.
We don't know.
I don't want to speculate, but the NBA guys are in better position to fend this off than almost anyone else.
Yeah. But we talked about this we brushed against this with the Kobe discussion. It is, not to always go back to this word, but it is surreal to see these athletes, these amazing people who can 360 windmill jam from the foul line, come down with a disease that's scary. Scary is the wrong word. I'm sorry to keep on using that word. This disease that is that we're all talking about. And that, to me, is the surreal part of it. To see someone like Rudy Gobert, who dominates on the NBA court, come down with this thing that we can also come down with is jarring a little bit.
Well, NBA players are uniquely vulnerable to this because when they walk around, literally every single person who sees them for every minute of the day is trying to shake their hand or high five them.
Yeah, it's true. Or give them a pen to sign something.
Like, it's wild.
Yeah.
Every person is like, high five, high five. Oh, it's Rudy Gobert, high five.
Yeah.
Yeah, sign my hand, sign my ball, sign my tit. Just like,
hey,
all these guys.
a carb on carb, masculine torso.
Yeah, that's not gendered.
No.
Literally, every single person who runs into them is trying to get them to sign something, slap their hand, or shake their hand. It's unique, actually. No one does that to us.
Yesterday, I bought a reasonable, like we discussed, a reasonable amount of toilet paper for a reasonable amount of poop, and a couple frozen French bread pizzas, and a bag of chips because I enjoy eating chips. And they gave me a pen to sign the credit card receipt with. I'm like, are you crazy? Are you handing me? I do not know where that pen has been, sir.
What I'm getting a little edgy about is touch screens. Like when you're in a cab or you're
Feces,
in like a coffee shop, like every single person who walks in there touches that same button that's like $1 tip, no receipt. Every single person. But you also don't want to use cash.
No, change is the paranoia at apex.
This is the end of cash as we know it in our society.
No more pennies. This is the day pennies died.
Well, they said that this the virus, the spores or the droplets, whatever the technical jargon would be, they can live for up to 2 days on things like steel and metal. Which is like, yes, leave the coins alone. Keep them in that jar, and then throw that jar under the ocean.
I know. I've tried my whole life not to be a germaphobe. It's really difficult in 2020, but I'm still not a germaphobe. I had some change in my pocket and I put it in my change jar yesterday, and I just had to relax. I just washed my hands and continued with my night.
Well, I know we've talked about your bodega purchases now 2 days in a row, your frozen pizzas. Can we just get back to what is going to happen with the rest of this NBA, and then we can move along from that and get back to your the contents of your freezer. Right now, I think we'll just jump into the playoffs. That's my.
No, you can't do that.
You can't do that though.
No, there's games to be played. Like, people want in on that 8th seed. There's ping pong balls to figure out. A lot's at stake with these regular season games, which is funny for the people who think the regular season doesn't matter. The whole structure of this is based off of the regular season. That's why tanking's important. The Knicks have to have a chance to tank, man. we don't have the pole position in the lottery.
I mean, now we're dealing with a season that has been untainted by tanking. It's only tainted by Rudy Gobert. But we can sit here and say these are the actual playoff seedings. These are the teams who are actually the worst because they never had a chance to throw the season down the tubes at the end. We have a pure, unblemished season. I say seed them up, distribute the lottery. You don't even have to do ping pong balls anymore. Just give them, oh, you're the worst team? This is real. We have a real, genuine NBA season. I say just move on. Give the Sixers OKC's 21st pick and move along.
All right, at least we figured one thing out, which is I would never want you as commissioner of the NBA. We figured that out for sure. But what?
That's old news. Come on.
But what are the Trailblazers gonna say? They're 3.5 games out from the 8th seed. They have Lillard back. They want to play these games out, right?
What do you mean? What are they gonna say? They should have played better.
I mean, sure. I mean, or the Pelicans are the same distance, and the Kings are the same distance, and they're all tied, and they all have the same record, or they're all the same number.
It's unblemished.
It's totally blemished. It's 100% blemished because it's not simulating the entire program. You're cutting it off 3/4 of the way, and that is a blemish by definition. The thing has to finish out. A lot of you are the self-care king, and you're saying people who were taking care of themselves during the first half of the season don't have a chance to just lock up a playoff spot in the second half?
No. I'm saying self-care. It is what it is. Move on with your life. Oh, you're a playoff team. You're not a playoff team. It's cool. You're a lottery team now. All right, move on.
To that point, just play the games. Who cares? Why do we have to rush into the playoffs? Just play them out.
Let's just get to the Sixers-Celtics first-round matchup. That's what I want to see anyhow. I want the OKC's pick, and I want the Sixers-Celtics. I'm good to go. You know what's amazing is that 9 of the last 16 picks at this point, as would convey to a different team.
I like that.
I like it. A lot of turmoil at the end.
Do the Knicks? I'm looking now. Ooh, the Knicks have 27. Went down. Not into that.
One thing that's also interesting is that some players who've had very bad injuries, if this is delayed long enough,
Ben Simmons
could come back. Well, not Ben Simmons, Kevin Durant.
Oh yeah, Kyrie Irving. But yeah, totally.
Nurkic just started. I think he was just cleared to play.
Yeah, he's on his way back too, and that makes a big difference. To my point, for Portland, they've been waiting for Nurkic all season, and they get him. Let's just play out the games, and if this goes into the summer, whatever. So be it.
I've had it with your sympathy for the Blazers. If there's one team we have established on Cookies Hoops, the most influential basketball podcast, is that. I'm sorry, were you talking about Nurkic back and the Blazers again?
Wait, I blacked out for a second. Were you talking about the Blazers?
I don't know. I heard the word C.J. McCollum, and I kind of just passed out there.
All I remember is you saying Blazers. Now I feel totally rested. What happened?
I don't know. I just caught a little shut eye when you said Dame Lillard's self-care. I don't know.
You lost me at Li. I mean, the Magic is the AC. The East is kind of locked up. The Wizards are 5.5 games back. I mean, I still want to see the lottery balls play out. I think the lottery has a bigger impact.
This is a uniquely insane reason you want the games to be played, because you want the ping pong balls to shake out.
The team that gets Zion Williamson changes forever. So you have to do this right.
I get all that. But my point is, now with the flattening of the lottery odds,
you still got to do it right.
That's the least important thing. The least important thing is like who gets an incremental amount of lottery ping pong balls more than another team.
No, because it throws it all into question. You have to do it right.
But that's not the real reason here. That's the Andrew Kuo reason, which I respect, but it's like not the actual reason to play the rest of the games. The reason is you say, because we want to play the rest of the games, and we want to get the playoffs right, and we want to make sure that
in the vacuum of just sports, I think in the vacuum of just this NBA thing, I think the lottery is as important as the Wizards or Magic getting the 8th seed. That just doesn't matter to me.
I'm not saying that the lottery itself doesn't matter. I'm saying that with the flattening of odds and the way that it is already arranged right now is fairly unlikely to change dramatically over the last 20 games, that this is a distinctly Kuo reason to play it out. It's like
I'm
get the end of the lottery right. And you're very distinctly Kuo. But you're also a Knicks fan, so I understand this. But,
I have a lot invested in this.
But my point is the amount of shuffling. Yeah, but I mean the amount of shuffling that's going to happen, and then with the flattened odds, you're still talking about like Kevin Bacon degrees of meaningfulness.
You have to do it. It's like doing your taxes. You just have to do it right. You can't just guess. You go to jail. I think you have to simulate this thing correctly, and there is no rush to get to the playoffs. There is no rush. Just play the games, man.
Well, that's where I disagree a bit, though, is because if this gets delayed for several months, and then you're like, well, we've got to play out the rest of the season, and then we'll get to the playoffs, then we're midway through the summer. What are we going to do? Are we going to do like a full year? Are we going to cut the next season short? I feel like if you're going to cut a season short, you do it now. And then you say, let's get back on our regular schedule next year. That would just be my approach. I don't know how you sandwich in, a season, a postseason, the start of the next season from, let's say, July, August, September, October, November. I just don't know how you do it.
The solution that I want is play out the regular season. They might chop off 10 games, but play as many games as possible, as everyone agrees to, and then cut the off days with the playoffs, because there's a big gap between games in the conference finals and finals. If some days maybe we go back to a back-to-back situation for 1 year, and we condense it by weeks, and that could save a whole month off the calendar.
Yeah, that's true. And you get rid of the preseason.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm into that. Just have 1 week of preseason and let's go.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's all these ways to do it. I won't be mad at any of them. I don't even think they should rush back, but I expect to see games. I expect America to handle this closer to China than Italy, but we don't know. But I would expect to see games again this season, but would not be shocked if we didn't.
I wonder. Yes, we've been saying this. The theme of this episode is who freaking knows.
No, yeah.
That things are evolving quickly in ways that are unexpected and then quickly feel predictable. Mm-hmm. They're canceling the season. What? And you're like, well, yeah, I guess they had to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're right. We could be playing basketball in July, or it could be the start of next season is jeopardized. Mm-hmm. We just do not know what our lives are going to hold for the next 6 months. Yeah.
And any basketball would be a relief. And, we talked yesterday about how things are comforting to us. And it's funny, a few hours later, they canceled the thing that we were talking about. And I feel comfortable with them doing that. I think it was a good decision. I don't need to rush to see this back. But what are we going to do in the meantime? Fan fiction?
Well, what are we going to do is the real question for everyone who's now going to be inside. Okay, we're going to be on Amazon and Netflix, blah, blah, blah. But right, what do basketball fans get? Mm-hmm. And I'm sort of thinking remember during the lockout, there was this whole basketball, was it Basketball Never Ends, Basketball Never Sleeps, whatever the campaign was, where you had Kevin Durant playing at Darius Rucker Park, and you had sort of a barnstorming group of NBA players. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you could get almost a streaming league playing for these guys, because I'm sure they want to stay in shape, where they could be tested regularly. Ooh. Rampantly. I know it's risky. It's really risky.
Iced tea. Yeah, they would never allow that.
I know. I'm just trying to brainstorm. If you had say 20 dudes who all live in LA, and they're we're just going to live stream our practices and our pickup runs, and we're going to have a mini little league, and we're going to be playing, and you can just watch NBA players play on a daily basis. But again, they'd have to be literally tested, because one of them gets it. They all do. Yeah. I don't know if there's any solution here. I'm trying to come up with one where we can watch basketball. I mean, and I don't know that there is one.
It's a matter of time, right? But in 5 to 25 years, we'll just be watching NBA 2K, and a league of that will just appoint as the league. So, should we get PlayStations?
Right. Is this the moment for eSports?
I mean, it could be. Those controllers are filthy, man. I heard there's poop all over them. eSports.
This is just gamer fuel, Mountain Dew, and fecal matter. It's nothing else.
Yeah. It's Soylent and poo particles. But yeah, I was thinking should cookies get a league going? I could
an e-league?
Yeah. Yeah, if we get our favorite 29 listeners, or let's say 27, the Knicks are not into it, so you could be the Sixers and I can have a adopted team. I'll pick the Hornets. Why not?
What was the last time you regularly played basketball video games, let alone video games, but basketball video games?
The 90s, but only because I'm susceptible to being addicted to them. When I was in junior high, I had a stopwatch and I timed myself to beat games. like Zelda. I would just time myself and sit there and try to beat my time. So I had kind of an addictive personality, so I had to stop.
Don't those games all have timers on them?
No, not in Nintendo 8-bit.
Oh yeah, Mario Brothers definitely had the little thing going.
Oh,
maybe it only did it by each level. I take that back.
Yeah, Zelda and Metroid, there's many ways to beat that game. You don't have to do everything. You can kind of wander around.
I feel like the last time I was playing was like the 2K series around 2K.
Basketball games are not good because we're all Lonzo Ball on the controller, and the program can't guess what we're gonna do. So we want to outlet a pass, and they'll just like send the player off into the sideline. It's annoying.
I've always loved the idea of basketball video games becoming incredibly good, but I've stopped playing them many, many ages ago. I went down to I think it was at South Seaport. This is a long time ago, and it was like the Madden Championships or something, and these were the best players on the planet at John Madden football, and they were so crazy good.
John Madden football.
They were just incredibly good.
Yeah,
it was
I watched
insane.
that on TV.
They would audible every single play, and they'd move all the guys around and on both sides of the ball simultaneously. It was this incredible different level of skill, and I kind of stopped playing video games after that. I was just like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, why am I even bothering with this?
Yeah, the simulation got crazy. Although, like, we talked about this maybe a year and a half ago about the rise of esports, and the question was at the time, could esports win over the fans that are casual? Because it has its fan base that'll sell out Barclays Arena for a World of Warcraft tournament, but it can't reach outside of that. Like, our friends who are not quite into it aren't seduced by it. And I think after that, it hasn't quite worked that way. Sort of like, Outdoor Voices. There was a big New York Times piece about Outdoor Voices and Casper mattresses not working. And I thought that was interesting because they followed a model of Warby Parker, a really successful model, one of the best IPOs in history. And it didn't quite work, even though conceptually it should have, and it did for a second. And I think that way about esports as well. We think things are going to progress and the stock market will keep on going up, but esports is kind of at a crossroads. I may be wrong, but I don't think it's taken over our zeitgeist like I thought it would.
Yeah, I did not have that same optimism regarding esports appeal to non-serious gamers. And that's just based on personal interests.
That was the challenge. They couldn't win you over.
And my lack of interest led to the demise, really, of esports. But to the article that you're talking about, the business model that was called into question was the one that was based on millennial consumption, but also one-time consumption. If you're selling mattresses and you sell everybody a mattress, people keep mattresses for 5 years, 10 years.
Wow.
And it was the same story with
Outdoor Voices.
sort of yeah. And Outdoor Voices was kind of different, I think.
Yeah.
But it also does talk about this modern economic model of venture capitalists in these quasi-tech companies that want to see returns. And they give you a lot of money to build out really quickly. And I'm trying to figure out how this could tie back to the NBA. And I don't know if it does, but what NBA does have is they have an audience that continuously wants the product. It's not a one-time thing. You're not like, I'm going to like the NBA for a second. And I think that's what the bummer here is.
Unless you're a Lakers fan.
Is that we have grown acclimated to a constant amount of NBA news. It could be free agency. It could be summer league. And have nothing is very strange for us.
Yeah. I remember I was in Portugal and I went on a cruise and it was awesome. I'm really glad I did that. And the woman got up on the boat and she was like, well, welcome to my country. And the first thing I want to talk about is soccer. And Ronaldo is from Portugal. And it's like, that's Ronaldo's home right there. And I bring up soccer and I know you guys aren't fans, but sports is culture and culture is life. Therefore, just deal with it. He's our country's hero. And I thought that was really cool to hear as someone who gets a little pushback from my more well-rounded friends who don't really care about basketball as much as I do or we do. And I just think it's part of the way we talk about so many things, and it's a really comforting way to discuss bigger ideas in a smaller, more harmless way. And to have that not around for a second there's a void. And I think do I have to read a book? Am I going to read a book?
I think that's what I'm really most concerned about, is that we'll be forced to turn to reading.
No. Like,
I won't do it. It's like voting for Joe Biden. And then you'll see me months from now swallowing my pride, holding my nose, and opening up a book.
Yeah. Are we going to have to listen to music? But music is such a social thing. I feel
this
like
could be music's big moment.
Can it, though? Because all the concerts are canceled or postponed. I wanted to go to the Dashboard Confessional 20-year concert last night, but decided not to because of Coronavirus.
There was a funny tweet that someone posted, and it went very viral, much like your recent tweet. Congratulations on your virality. He said, my manager went on an 8-week sabbatical on January 25th, and him and his wife rented a cabin in the North Carolina woods and didn't bring no type of technology with them so they could enjoy each other company. He's finna come back to pure hell. He don't even know Kobe gone. I was like, that was all within the last 8 weeks? I was like, holy shit.
Wow.
That feels surreal. I'm like, oh, the Kobe thing? That's the oldest of news. Like, that was years ago.
During the election in 2016, the run-up to it, if you told me what would happen in the next 4 years, I would have said, bullshit. No way. Show me.
So you and your wife are leaving the cabin. Time to log back on. Excuse me? like, what's the order of things that are insane? And I'm not even saying
are we
need
ranking
to rank.
insanity?
No, I'm saying we don't want to necessarily rank them.
Are we listing insanity?
It's more like when you're like, what, and then what happened, and then what? Yeah. It's like, yeah, Kobe died in a helicopter crash. Like, oh my God, what? Also, the NBA season is canceled because Rudy Gobert gave everyone coronavirus. Like, what's coronavirus? Well, yeah, everything's canceled for the next foreseeable future, and the stock market tanked. I'm sorry, what?
Joe Biden became our candidate. It's like, wait, I thought we learned our lesson in 2016.
Bernie was betrayed by Elizabeth Warren? No, I can't believe it.
Andrew Yang?
UBI sounds pretty good to a lot of people right now.
So everyone's shitting 7 times a day.
Okay, well, I'm just going to buy some Purell and I'll be fine. Got some news about that, man. Can't get it.
So cocaine is medicinal.
So the Oklahoma City Thunder pick conveys to the Sixers? Unbelievable.
Anthony Davis leaves the Lakers for the Bulls?
What about this idea? And a lot of people have it's getting more and more support.
Oh, no.
What if, to fill this void where we have nothing, we announce it's an off season? Mm-hmm. Free agency, trades. Let's allow trades.
I'm down for that. Let's be accelerationists over here.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it can still be this season, but right now, trade deadline taken away. You can trade.
I like that.
Sign free agents. Everyone's a free agent.
So
let's get the hot stove league up and running during this hiatus. Let's adjust all the rosters, then come back with our new rosters and finish up the season.
Oh man, I would love that. So the status you would have this summer, you just have right now. So if you are a unrestricted free agent, you would just be that right away. And let's shuffle the deck. So would the Lakers buy players or would they rebuild? would the Celtics rebuild now because they don't want to re-sign Jason Tatum because a max Jason Tatum, a max Kemba Walker, and a max Jaylen Brown doesn't get you shit.
I want a fully Joker-fied NBA, my friend. I want chaos to unfold. If we can't actually see people playing on the court, give us the stuff we want that we can talk about. Roster upheaval, free agency, trades. Do the draft. Do it all.
Oh, look who's into the draft all of a sudden. Mr. Draft Man over here.
The draft king.
Yeah. They call him the big draft. Man, yeah, I would love all that stuff. I think the NBA with a little bit of chaos would be amazing. We can handle this. Come on, our brains are big enough for this. Twitter would not freak out.
Look, what is most exciting about the NBA? It's the off season. We like the games. We like the playoffs.
Yeah.
The off season, the chaos, the
hope.
This league. Sadly, mournfully, this league.
This league.
This league.
How do you say that in French? Sacre bleu.
This league of ours.
How is that French?
It wasn't French at all. I was just saying it. Dude, French is canceled. Gobert, we were talking about the advantage that French restaurants have. Mm-hmm. Now it's over. Gobert has ruined it.
I don't know. What are some French things that we enjoy that we would take for granted? And obviously not the fries. Those are freedom fries, Ben.
Yeah, that's what the NBA should get into. Like extreme patriotism.
I'm into this. So, do you tax teams for foreign players? Mm-hmm. Is there a foreign player tax? Oh, man, Mark Cuban would not stand for that.
Oh, it's going to wreak havoc with the Dallas Mavericks.
Mm-hmm. But that's it.
Yeah, just now.
Oh, what about the Nuggies? Oh, no, RJ Barrett, our Lord and Savior.
Oh, yeah, I say send all the Canadians home.
Those Canadians and their viral hubris.
Shout out to Tom Cotton.
Yes, always shout out to Tom Cotton.
Who's declared that we're going to take vengeance on those who gave us this virus.
Cool, Tom.
Oh, thank God. I don't want them giving us another virus who ever concocted this and sent it over to our shores.
Oh, can we talk about the odd ending to Vinsanity? If you want to talk about Canada, right? The Canadian, the first Canadian Drake, Vince
20
Carter.
years later, the French jump over him.
Right. Famous for jumping over Knicks legend Frederick Weiss in World Play. But it was kind of fake, right? Like, he kind of shrunk a little bit. His forehead touched nut. And, it wasn't a clear jump, but it was very cool. And Vince Carter was the best for so long.
Are you a Vince Carter dunk truther?
Sure. He didn't clear Weiss. There was nut touchage.
Wow. Nick's loyalty to the end. Defending Weiss's honor 20 years later.
Check the tape, baby. But the ending of Vinsanity possibly last night was kind of sweet. It was like the Knicks were playing the Hawks, two very competitive, amazing teams with everything on the line. In overtime, and Mike Breen, and I was watching the Breen-Frazier call, and Breen, I think, is forget Spike Lee. Breen is my guy. Breen is the Knicks guy for the last 20 years, and I really love him. And he was
the Knicks announcing team is fantastic.
Oh, they're so great. They feel like friends, We've been through it all, man. But
I feel like you go in little waves of being irritated by Clyde, but you always come back and you're like, I couldn't imagine listening to a game without him.
Oh, no, I go to his restaurant, Clyde's Wine and Dine. You can shoot hoops in there. I love Clyde. I mean, he kind of...
I do too.
...drifts off, but, he has my favorite saying, the Knicks cannot handle prosperity. I think that is, my favorite idea in the world. But,
But Breen is that guy. He is, in some ways, the voice of the NBA at this point.
Breen is fantastic, and we're so lucky to have him on our local feed. And he's so articulate about the. That's a terrible word. He's so self-aware about the Knicks as he pleases like the company he works for, and he was calling this game with a ton of melancholy. He was like, I don't know what we're doing. This doesn't feel right, but RJ Barrett with another brick, like he was he was going through it, and it was a somber tone in the second half of the game. They went to OT, and Vince Carter comes in. Everyone knows on the court that the season has been suspended, and it might be the last time we play. And the fans were cheering for Vince, and he comes in, and everyone knows the moment and the gravity of the moment, and he sinks a three undefended. And it was so sweet. He like hugged Trae Young, and he had a big smile, and I kind of got a little emo, a little wistful, Ben. It's called Wist.
Vince had a great career. He's probably, let's say he's a Hall of Fame player.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. He was also really great in college, and that matters as well. Mm-hmm.
The dunk contest gets him into the Hall of Fame, I think.
Right. I mean, he was a cultural icon. He was the greatest in-game dunker in the history of the NBA, and like just for that alone, you kind of should be in the Hall of Fame. Dunking is the most ethical possible thing you can do on the court, and he was better at it than anyone who ever lived in the NBA. Because, dude, you watch these clips of high schoolers now, and they're doing outrageous stuff. Just outrageous.
Dude, some YMCA, TJ McConnell looking dudes. I can't believe my eyes.
Yeah, that one guy did in-game beneath both legs, like windmill. I'm like, no one's ever done that in the NBA, and you did it in a high school game.
This is wild, man.
But
not
yes.
Robert Sacre. Not that viral clip that you guys could check out. That is not Carter-esque.
But yeah, Vince deserves the Hall of Fame. I'm with that. And he did not get... Look, he might still play. If they play out the season, we'll get more Vince.
Yeah.
But, he did not get quite the send-off that the D. Wade and Dirk Nowitzki did. But he probably didn't deserve that either. He was not identified...
Get out of here, you ring-chasing... You're counting rings, man. He deserved it. He just didn't want it.
No, I don't care about the winning rings. I'm saying it was just that he was on a bunch of different franchises.
That's true.
If he had stuck around and stayed in Toronto, but he kind of forced his way out, and people didn't really like him there when he left. He didn't have that
New Jersey. He's got that Sopranos vibe, Tony Soprano, Steve.
Yeah, he didn't really. Yeah, if he had really embraced like Gabagool and been about that moose, he could have really stuck around and been the Jersey guy. Yeah. But as it is, what franchise do we associate him with outside of Toronto? And he kind of burned that bridge. It's like I don't think of him as a Maverick. I don't think of him as a Hawk, a Net. So I think that's the thing. He doesn't have like a home base that would ride for him in the way that Miami did for D Wade, or LA did with Kobe, or Dirk did with, or Dallas did for Dirk.
It's tough to frame it.
Yeah, it's just like master dunker, like cool.
Oh man, but remember, like I will always think about that. I believe he was playing the logo Iverson in '99, and he went to his graduation, and they dogged him for it, and he showed up and had a pretty good game, I think. And they said he wasn't. He
did miss a game-winning attempt though, so I'm sure that was held against him, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they were there. They were right there.
Yeah, I think he missed a baseline jumper that would have either won or tied the game.
It's because he appreciates education, Ben. Now he has a bright future outside of. Now that his playing days are over, he at least has something to fall back on.
It's weird thinking back then when we were younger and more prone to listening to boomers, despite being naturally subversive in thought. And I kind of remember the outcry about, like, as you said, dogging him for going to his graduation. Yeah. And I remember being sort of conflicted, where it's like, of course you agree with all the boomers at that time when you're young and you're like,
boomer
that's
susceptible.
Right.
Actually, we're not boomer susceptible. We hated that narrative.
But I'm saying back then, I remember being conflicted. Everyone's saying, oh, you can't go to your graduation. And also being like, what did that have to do with anything?
Nothing.
What, was he tired because he was on the plane? Did he get jet lagged? Like, what exactly was he supposed to have been like?
Did he catch some sort of virus shaking the president of the school's hand?
Was a tiny little Gobert
it's
somewhere
the
in
Carolina
the mix?
virus? Carolina V? But, yeah, I mean, This is an aside. I was so disappointed in one of our close friends because, you talk about how susceptible you are to boomers in life, and kind of at what point you took the I think it's the red pill, and you're like, you know what, I need to push back for long enough until I figure this out. And one of my friends this weekend admitted that he's a hardcore Beatles fan. And I just about lost my mind. I'm like, what have we been doing, man? Who are you? Show your face, man. He's like, oh, I'm obsessed with the Beatles. I'm like, oh, my life, my small, tiny, insignificant life. But it's funny, as we get older, we accept these things that we wouldn't accept when we were younger. And, like there's that whole theory that, as people get older, they vote more conservative. And with the Bernie stats, you could see that play out a little bit, and how many young people are not voting for Joe Biden, and how many older people are. And I think that's interesting in the framework of our lives in terms of politics, entertainment, and music and sports. And hopefully, I want to say I still bristle back against boomerism, but I know in ways I don't. And
are you a baby boomer?
No, I'm a Gen X, baby.
Gen X, the perfect balance, the Tobias Harris between the boomers, the millennials. I don't know what the Zoomers are the next gen. We gotta figure out what they're about.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're about.
A bunch of Kyries.
A bunch of Kyries.
So I support them. We didn't talk at all about the coach of the Nets being fired a couple of weeks ago. Things really have, a couple of weeks ago, a couple of days ago, things really have evolved since then, huh?
This league.
I mean, Kenny Atkinson fired. Didn't make cookies. Unmentioned.
Hey, it's hard when you got to rail against the machine. Rage against the machine.
Okay, what did we have to talk about? Elizabeth Warren's filthy betrayal.
Andrew Yang's virtuosity.
The ultimate sellout, Andrew Yang. What else do we have? Ooh, Kenny Atkinson fired. Jimmy Butler roasting Brett Brown.
Oh, we got to talk about Butler. Okay, let's get into it. The Knicks should not. Let's just knock him down like vaccines.
King, go off.
The Knicks should not hire Atkinson. I don't know why people want all this gotcha-ism with the coach. Mike Miller is fine. He's a good enough coach. The problem is not the coach. You could say the problem is ownership. The problem is leadership. We have a new guy there. They just need a good player. Mike Miller is good. Just keep him.
I have no strong opinions about Mike Miller. They have played better under him. I haven't taken a deep dive on how their style of play has evolved. Are they taking better shots? I know the defense has improved a lot, and that's a testament to coaching.
Personnel. Mitch Robinson is having a run, and that could be a testament to coaching too, but he was hurt for a little while too.
Yes, and I 100% agree with that. That someone like Julius Randle was probably due to play better. And I do think the Knicks were overloaded in the same way the Sixers are, with guys who kind of like to do the same thing and like to inhabit the same places on the court.
Yes.
But Miller has done a totally fine job.
Good enough.
I think Atkinson is a very good coach, and I would hire him over Miller, and that's not even a knock on Miller. I just am not familiar enough with his body of work to say that I would prefer him to Kenny Atkinson, who I think is an excellent coach, and this is based on my interviewing him a couple times. I really thought he was a smart dude, and I like him.
For sure. That whole Spurs Popovich brain trust is solid. I like their point of view. Could we talk about how are the duo of Durant and Irving more trouble than they're worth?
I know we're blaming Kyrie for this firing.
Leprechauns are blaming him.
Right. The BBM is blaming Kyrie for this, and I would agree that it's hard not to say that he has
something to do with it.
Exactly, because I don't think it's Karis LeVert. I don't think it's Joe the Walking Bucket Harris.
Dinwiddie's got ideas, man.
I mean, look, it could be related to Dinwiddie. But Dinwiddie also, from my interactions with him, and it was the same story when I talked with all these people, I was writing about Dinwiddie. Dinwiddie really respected the fact that the Nets and Atkinson gave him a chance to thrive. So I would be surprised if he was someone who did not like what was happening, because he's played really well this season too.
Yeah, I like him a lot.
But again, who's to say? Kyrie is taking the brunt of the criticism. So to your initial question, are these guys more trouble than they're worth? Thus far, for sure. KD hasn't played. Kyrie barely played, and potentially is involved in the removal of a good coach.
Okay,
So
not to
so
cut
far,
you
so
off.
bad. Yeah.
Not to cut you off, let me just give the lay of the land. This has everything to do with DeAndre Jordan. So when they traded when the three of them signed with the Nets, they assumed DeAndre would start over Jared Jack. And when Atkinson didn't start him, there was a tension between with those three versus management. And Jared Jack, in my opinion, is a better player, and you should play him more. And
You mean Jared Allen?
Oh, Jared Allen. I'm sorry. Jared Jack is a Knicks legend. Jared Allen is just someone who plays and has brunch in Brooklyn. But he's a better player than DeAndre Jordan is at this point. And I think there was tension that overflowed because they really wanted their guy, their veteran, to have his opportunity to be the starter. And that tension boiled over and allegedly got Atkinson removed.
Yes. And the day after he was removed, we saw a change in the starting lineup.
Yeah,
And
DeAndre
Jordan started. Yeah. So that's why I'm like, Kyrie is part of this.
100.
But it also seems directly about DeAndre Jordan starting. Mm-hmm. That seemed to be, as you perfectly explained it, a real sticking point that led to this friction.
Yeah. And I get that. I think Atkinson, it's so interesting. I immediately thought that players really need an ex-player as a coach because there is a cultural divide between management and player. And, we always talk about the pitfalls of having a great player in charge of decision-making because we're human beings and we just want everything reflected to our personal success and why we were successful. Elton Brand, that player reminds me of a lo mein calzone, like everything to him is ravioli stuffed in a sub. But I think that's a thing that players need to have a common ground with their coach. And with Atkinson, he's a nerd. And he didn't have a prominent playing career. And I think that doesn't help in a situation like this.
Well, it's also an odd violation of a coach's autonomy to say that a decent but not great 32-year-old has to start. Like,
so
why?
Dumb. So dumb.
Like, DeAndre is not a relevant player.
No.
He's not bad this year. He's been fine.
Yeah.
He succeeds in their system. He does what he's supposed to do. But for him to be salty about starting enough that you'd get rid of the coach who was part of this organization and really put his fingerprints all over it in terms of giving guys an opportunity, putting them in position to succeed, helping sculpt guys like Dinwiddie and Joe Harris into contributing players.
Joe Buckets.
Who were taken off the NBA's scrap heap.
Yeah.
And to say, like, the sticking point here is DeAndre Jordan wants to start. Like, that's some bullshit.
This is a deformation of the thing that people always say is the hardest thing, which is an aging superstar. It's like, oh, the hardest thing is an aging player. What are we doing? DeAndre Jordan? Like, can you
It's not even an aging superstar.
No, he's an aging player. He's an aging ex-Knick cast-off.
Like, literally.
Yeah. And
you were only signed because you were friends with these guys.
Yes. But this kind of reminds me of our Bernie Sanders debate from yesterday. And I think that these are the challenges that Atkinson had to face. And even though it makes sense to start Jared Allen, Atkinson had to deal with the personalities in that room.
For sure.
He didn't do it.
Yes. I am going to push back on your characterization of him as a nerd, though, because he played 14 years professionally.
Shout out to the baller, Kenny Atkinson.
Yeah, he played in Europe for 14 seasons.
Oh, that doesn't count. Oh, he's some Frederick Weiss stuff.
Yeah, he's over there going against foie gras salesmen.
Didn't Mike D'Antoni also play forever?
Yeah, in Italy. Yeah, he's a star.
D'Antoni's well respected.
But, yes, I think D'Antoni would be an upgrade for the Knicks. I'm sorry. I think Atkinson would be an upgrade, but I don't also see the point in doing it necessarily.
He is a 100% capable coach who could help a team, but the Knicks aren't ready yet. Don't fire up the wok until you've chopped all the garlic, Ben. You know what I mean? It's just like, all right, I'm ready to make this notorious TSO chicken. I'm like, but have you bought chicken yet? It's like, no, but the wok is ready. I'm like, dude.
Are the Nets going to... The Nets are in a weird position because they have these two guys who are super powerful and are superstars, absolute superstars, who eat up the majority of the salary cap. You have their buddy DeAndre, who's kind of like now a bit of a problem.
He's another Seidler with Kyle Kuzma.
But you also have a very smart front office.
Allegedly.
And they're... I think they are. They've made every move that they have made, even the ones that did not work. They have done it for a logical reason. When they tried to sign Tyler Johnson, when they traded for Crabbe after trying to sign him,
Rap
those
battle
were
legend,
those were
Tyler
mistakes.
Johnson, TJ.
He's got bars.
Always.
Those were errors. They were poor moves, but they
Alan
made
Crabbe.
sense.
Yeah.
Alan Crabbe. But they made sense. And I think they've handled this rebuild in a smart way. But to your point about these guys being more trouble than they're worth, how much say do they have on the next coach?
I know, and who would be that next coach? It's not like you would just get a better coach than Kenny Atkinson. There's a field, and we know the field. And I can't really see a big upgrade, but they're not looking for an upgrade. They're looking for Ty Lue just to be like, whatever you guys want. To be honest, like, KD, what's going to make you happy? And that's a skill, too. And Ty Lue has that skill.
The big problem here is that DeAndre Jordan holds sway because he has the ear of the team's two superstars, and because they wanted that trio to come together as a package, they gave him a 4-year deal. He's making $30 million over the next 3 seasons after this one.
I know.
Like, DeAndre isn't just a guy you can cut bait on. He's got a contract that no other team in the NBA wants, and he's friends with your two marquee max players. DeAndre holds a lot of power in that organization, and he's the exact kind of person you don't want to hold power in your organization, an aging player.
And this is why I'm just workshopping that maybe the Nets aren't smart, because they cut the process off and signed these 3 guys. And of course, I think every other team who could do it would have done it, but they were supposed to be smarter. And as soon as KD popped his Achilles, I'm like, it's not what we thought it was. Like, this is significantly not something smart, in my opinion.
We will see. And at this point, they are looking a bit like golden handcuffs.
Yeah, I think
They're
they'll
the
be
exact
fine.
guys you wanted to sign.
Yeah,
And you couldn't not sign them if they wanted to come to your team.
I hate
But
that. I hate that rationale. Like, we just had to sign them. Like, no, you didn't. You don't have to sign a player coming off an Achilles, or you don't have to sign DeAndre Jordan to 4 years.
I hear you, but these clearly were things that seemed to be on the table. And if you can get Kyrie and KD, and it's like, okay, the collateral damage is we have to give $10 million a year to their buddy, it feels like something that 99% of teams just hold their nose and do.
I feel like in life I'm DeAndre Jordan. Do you ever feel like you're DeAndre Jordan?
DeAndre Jordan is in an enviable position.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying like...
Kingmaker, DeAndre Jordan.
I'm not saying the guy who ends Brandon Knight's life with a filthy dunk. I'm saying the part of him that is like, well, I have friends that you really like. Can I just like sidle along with them? And can I get a slice of pizza too? I feel like that a lot in my life, which is not how Jimmy Butler felt in Philadelphia.
Yeah, so Jimmy Butler went on JJ Redick's podcast with The Ringer, and they were both members of the Philadelphia 76ers last season. And Jimmy dished a bit about his friction with Brett Brown, the Sixers head coach. And well, what did you think of it? I have some thoughts, but you just saw it, the video itself, I believe, an hour ago.
Mm-hmm.
What was your
video.
takeaway?
What is going on in Philly? How do they not identify who is sitting in the room? How do they not realize that Jimmy Butler is the key to a championship and he's sitting right there? But I love Jimmy Butler for not only sipping a glass of wine during this whole thing, but also his acknowledgement of the perception of him being like, oh, everyone knows I'm a jerk, so I expect to be treated like that. But guys, just talk to me about anything. Like, we get along. The team is happy. You guys aren't talking to me.
Let me say this. I find Jimmy Butler's energy awesome.
Oh, yeah, he's a homie.
I love how he is so charismatic and mischievous and always kind of talking shit. And he's the master storyteller that can tell you
Pick a
nothing.
card, any card.
He can tell you nothing. That Sixers story was nothing. And he presented it as if he was about to give you a scoop, that it was about to be this delicious dishing. And the story was a nothing burger. But his delivery sold it. It's like, oh, wow, here comes Jimmy Butler. Are you kidding me? He went in there and he didn't know who was running the meeting and no one was talking?
Yeah.
That's the story?
But
That
also,
was literally the story.
But the
story
Ben
is that-
Simmons nugget was interesting.
That was interesting. We'll get to that in a second. Mm-hmm. But that was kind of him ragging on Brett Brown. Was like, I went into the meeting. I didn't really know who was running stuff, and people weren't talking. They were just clicking through slides. And, I kind of said we should run some more pick and rolls. And, TJ feels the same way. Like, that was the story. It was kind of nothing. But he was so devilish in telling it that it made it feel like it was this like epic takedown of the Sixers coaching staff.
This is true with everything in life, right? Like, no one really has anything original. It's just how you deliver it.
100%. It was all delivery.
Yeah.
He sold it. It was great. It was an excellent performance, and I want more Jimmy Butler as a public as a storyteller, man.
TNT is just flip it and have Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler take over.
That would be
Ernie.
wonderful.
Oh, I would watch everyone. Yeah, that would be so great. But anyway.
So the nugget you were referring to about Ben Simmons was that in the playoffs against the Raptors, the Sixers more or less used Ben Simmons in the dunker spot off ball and had Jimmy Butler in the half court running the offense. And he made a reference to, it making Ben Simmons feel a certain way. And I think that the takeaway from that is that perhaps Ben Simmons said, I don't want to re-sign here long-term if Jimmy Butler is also going to be here long-term. And that there had been rumors about friction between the two. And maybe it wasn't even actual friction. Maybe it was just Ben Simmons saying, I don't want to have to share that role with another guy if this is going to be the next half decade of my career. And the Sixers then said, well, if he doesn't get along with Brett Brown and Ben Simmons isn't thrilled about this, maybe we go another direction. It did provide a little bit of context to otherwise mystifying personnel moves that the Sixers made.
Yeah. And this happens in sports quite a bit. No sin bin, but in your neck of the woods, the Buffalo Bills, Doug Flutie took the team to the playoffs. And in the first game of the playoffs, Rob Johnson started over him because management thought it was a better decision in that matchup. And that was like one of the notorious like forced Wally Pipp moments. And it does seem odd to mess up the continuity of a team and take Ben off the ball. But I think what Jimmy was saying was there was no communication. There was no explanation. I think if you sat down both those players and explained why that was happening, they would have been cool with it. But there was kind of not enough of that.
But it's also from the perspective of a guy who wasn't thrilled about some things that were happening. Mm-hmm. So when I look at it, because as we say on this show all the time, we never know how players feel. Mm. And that gave us a glimpse. This is how Jimmy Butler felt. And this is how Ben Simmons potentially felt from one perspective. When I look at it, as someone who can only see what's happening on the court, I'm like, this makes all the sense in the world. Kawhi is guarding Ben Simmons and not Jimmy Butler. Let's put Jimmy Butler, who is a talented, extraordinarily talented half-court creator, on the ball, and he's not being guarded by one of the most ferocious defenders in NBA history.
Right.
And let's put Ben Simmons in the dunker spot.
Right.
Simmons was really effective at scoring. He just didn't do much on that side of the ball. And he was also guarding Kawhi for 40 minutes a game.
Which is what you want.
When I looked at that, I was like, the Sixers did this perfectly. Their starting lineup obliterated the Raptors' starting lineup. The Sixers would have won that series if Mike Muscala was still on the roster. If they had one guard that would have allowed them to take J.J. Redick off the floor with a defensive replacement. There were a million ways that Philly easily wins that series.
Yeah.
And they still lost on a buzzer-beating shot in Game 7.
Right.
So when Jimmy Butler talks about that series, I'm like, that was Brett Brown's coaching masterstroke. Mm-hmm. He dominated the best players on Toronto with the Sixers' best players. It just fell apart because he had to play Boban and he had to put Greg Monroe on the court and eventually just put Simmons at center because he didn't have a single playable big man behind Joel Embiid. So to me, I'm like, that was one of Brett Brown's greatest moments. To me, he badly outcoached Nick Nurse. But from the player perspective, they're like, this was a moment when Brett Brown screwed up. This is a moment when players got in their feelings. Interesting perspective shift.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, to your point of we never know how players feel, but we do know Jimmy Butler is kind of a basketball genius, but he's really smart and he dissects the game in his own personal way. And all these players, I feel like these players really respond to coaches who are like, do your thing. Not like, hey, there's a system here. Can you just stand in the corner?
I mean, I just look at it that the Sixers had 3 top 15 players on the roster. And the inability to just say
Tobias Harris, go on, okay,
Mike Scott and Furkan Korkmaz. Yeah. But the Sixers had 3 of the top 15 players on the planet on the same team, and to not keep them together from an outsider is unthinkable. When you start viewing it internally with personality clashes, maybe it seems to be, in the words that you used earlier, more trouble than it's worth. I'm of the other stance where I'm like, fuck that, man. You 3 are going to have to sort this out because you're that good at basketball and we're going to win a championship. And we could have won one last year, even though you guys are grousing about it.
Yeah, it's sort of the reaction to a pandemic. And when you have 3 stars like that, I'm like, just sign them, just get them under contract. We'll figure everything out later.
We've got 3 to 5 years.
Yeah,
we'll get this right.
Take care of this now, and we can argue about racism, usage. All that stuff happens later. We just need to clamp this down right now.
Exactly. Shut down the season. End it. Sixers win. Back-to-back titles.
Just as
last year they won it. This year they kind of have won it. They won the last game that was technically played, right? Mm-hmm.
Just as Mother Nature intended. It was her plan to have Ben Simmons crowned.
Ben Simmons 2 rings.
Yeah.
Kevin Durant 0.
Yeah. It's funny, this trend in the NBA of players crowning other players in homage to Ben Simmons, acknowledging that they are just following the lead of this great player.
Truly the most virtuous basketball player. That, to see a young guy like Zion Williamson come out and sculpt his game without the defense and passing, of course, after Ben Simmons it's got to be so validating for someone like Simmons, a veteran.
Yeah. Ben Simmons too. More Ben Simmons.
Well, I think we're just going to have to do this on a daily basis. An hour and a half of chatting about Ben Simmons' greatness here on Cookies Hoops during the official NBA coronavirus hiatus.
There's no off days for Cookies, man.
Andrew Kuo, no off days.
Cookies.
Cookies.